We're back now to continue our discussion with George Papadopoulos. In the first segment, he discussed the mysterious Maltese professor Joseph Mifsud, who told him the Russians had dirt on Hillary Clinton, thousands of emails. But the plot thickened from there. Shortly after your meeting with Mifsud, where he said that the Russians had dirt on Hillary Clinton, about 2 weeks later, on May 10th, 2016, you have a fateful meeting in London which changes your life with another man whose name is sure to be in the news in the days ahead, an Australian named Alexander Downer, who is very confrontational with you. Take it from there, if you would.
Sure. So after Joseph Mifsud told me that the Russians have thousands of Hillary Clinton emails, I never told anyone on the Donald Trump campaign. I never told Donald Trump or Steve Bannon or anyone, even though I was in daily communication at that time with Stephen Miller, Corey Lewandowski, and others when I was living in London. So I never told anyone. First of all, I wasn't there to discuss hacked emails. It's not my business. And I'm not involved in any illegal behavior, and neither is the campaign. So clearly, when I met Joseph Mifsud and he told me this information, I had no idea that that's why he was wanting to meet with me. So then, as you stated, I met an Australian diplomat very suspiciously 10 days after Joseph Mifsud told me this information. And Alexander Downer, for the listeners of the program, is one of Hillary Clinton's and Bill Clinton's best friends in the world. When he was Australia's foreign minister, he donated $25 million of hard-earned Australian taxpayer money to the Clinton Foundation. Clearly, during my encounter with him, he was very hostile to Donald Trump and his policies and expressed the views of the Australian government that they clearly preferred Hillary Clinton and viewed Donald Trump as a pariah. So this individual, who I reported eventually to the FBI, to Congress, because I thought he was recording my conversation with his phone, ended up somehow giving some information to somebody that was passed along to the corrupt FBI under Jim Comey to help launch an investigation, which apparently was part of why they launched this investigation. I don't buy that story. I don't think William Barr buys that story. During his interview on CBS recently, he openly debunked that the investigation was launched in July, and it was launched much earlier than that. And it's in my firm belief, and I've been very open about this, and the president has been supporting my contention that the Australians were clearly in on this operation against us from the beginning.
Now, the story that's been told and retold in the media was that when you met with Alexander Downer, the Australian, the pro-Hillary Clinton Australian diplomat, that you were plied with liquor, you were drunk, and that you spoke, you told tales out of school, but you deny that you had too much to drink at that infamous meeting and that you ever told Mr. Downer that the Russians had damaging material related to Hillary Clinton, right?
You're absolutely right. And, Downer himself has gone public, and I even wrote it in my book. We had one light gin and tonic, and I was so disturbed by Alexander Downer's behavior that, as I explained, that I actually reported him to both Congress and the FBI for spying on me, because he was holding his phone in a manner that I thought was recording my conversation, and I didn't understand, quite frankly, what he was doing until later on. Of course, Bob Mueller's own prosecutors told me that he was basically recording my conversation. He was obviously part of an operation, and this information has never been told before. I've just recently come out with my story, and I testified about this behind closed doors to Congress, and that testimony has just now come out. But when the president talks openly about the need for William Barr to investigate the UK and Australia, he's not simply, these are not off-the-cuff remarks. There's a reason he's suggesting it, and there's also a reason why William Barr wants to actually look into the origins of this investigation and to understand why these foreign governments were spying on us themselves.
Yes, and those investigations by the Attorney General and by the Inspector General are, of course, well underway, and we'll start getting results from those investigations soon. But that meeting with Downer was in May of 2010. Let's fast forward 4 months to September 2nd, 2016, about 2 months before the election, and you get an email from a man you describe as a morbidly obese American professor at Cambridge University in England who sweats profusely and was nicknamed the Walrus, Stephan Halper. What transpires after that message that came seemingly out of the blue in what you describe as Halper hell?
Yes, that's a great point in question. So Stephan Halper is at the center now of, besides the foreign government interference, which includes Alexander Downer and Joseph Mifsud, who were working clearly with the British and the U.S. intelligence services to spy on us. Stephan Halper actually took it one step further, and he had been trying to set up Michael Flynn as early as 2015 with this Russian woman named Svetlana Lakova, who has recently sued Stephan Halper. And Stephan Halper has a history of spying on rival campaigns and worked with the CIA. So when I got this email, I didn't know who this person was, except that he had worked for a couple of U.S. Administrations, and he worked at Cambridge, and he wanted to pay me some money to write a report on the energy business in Israel, which I was an expert on at the time. So I flew to London, and I was expecting just to have a normal business meeting until he introduces me to this assistant of his who the New York Times obviously wrote about, this Azra Turk, who clearly was an agent, and I was very suspicious about her. I don't think she was working with the FBI. I think she was probably a foreign asset working with the CIA. And he basically, as I explained in my book, The Deep State Target, is there to spy on me for my political and business ties in the Middle East and to assure that I'm not advising Donald Trump on those issues, and then to record my conversations, which he was doing over the 3 days we were there. And that's what Donald Trump has declassified. That's what members of Congress now are openly discussing regarding transcripts of my meetings with informants, and we're going to get to the bottom of who actually was handling this guy and why he was trying to entrap Flynn and me.
Yes, I'm certain you're waiting with more breathless anticipation than almost anybody else at the results of these investigations by the Attorney General, on top of the Inspector General, whose report has been going on, or whose investigation has been going on for some time now. All right, so shortly after Trump shocks the world, wins the election, and takes office, the FBI interrogates you, and then months later, in July of 2017, the FBI snags you at Dulles Airport, throws you in jail, and ultimately accuses you of lying to them and facing up to 25 years in prison. Tell us how that whole thing went down.
There was a very strange man named Charles Towell, who I think was part of an entrapment operation run by the special counsel against me. In March, April, May, June, July of 2017, about a month after the FBI came to my house trying to catch me in a perjury trap, which they ended up doing. And this man came to me under the fake auspice of wanting to do business with me and some sort of consulting, and he gives me $10,000 in cash in a room in Israel without me understanding why he's giving it to me, except that I thought that this was probably some sort of operation. As you saw in my book, I take this money, I go give it to my lawyers in Greece, where I was vacationing at the time, and I tell this individual, do not contact me again. A couple days later, I fly to Dulles, where I had an interview waiting with Fox News, actually, at the time. And I'm arrested at an airport without the agents telling me what I had done wrong. They're looking through my bags, looking for this $10,000, which now there's been reports that the special counsel himself and his team actually directed at me, which is a whole new can of worms that you're going to probably see some headlines about over the next months. And I'm basically told that this is what happens when you work for Donald Trump by some very aggressive agents of the FBI after I'm in a daze and jet-lagged after coming off a 12-hour flight. So I don't know what's happening. I'm basically thrown in a cell as if I'm a narco dealer or a terrorist. They probably were treated better than I was as an American citizen. And then I'm looking at a judge the next day without being told what I had done wrong, and the judges and the prosecutors are saying you're looking at 25 years in prison without me understanding what I had done. So the whole situation was incredibly chaotic. This entire investigation, as I detail in my book, was clearly pre-planned, orchestrated, involved foreign governments, foreign intelligence, a weaponized U.S. intelligence, in order to assure that Donald Trump would not win the 2016 election. And if he did win, as you explained at the beginning of our conversation, his presidency would be crippled by a witch hunt, which I don't agree that his presidency was crippled. I think he did a great job. I think the economy and the U.S. has rebounded tremendously under President Trump, but still, it was an unnecessary intrusion into this country, and it did divide the country. And I think what these new investigations are about healing this country and assuring what happened in 2016 never happens again to an American citizen, a political campaign, or the president himself.
I thank you so much for sharing your story, not just with us, but with the American people. And thanks for joining us today on Liberty Nation Radio.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is George Papadopoulos. His book is Deep State Target: How I Got Caught in the Crosshairs of the Plot to Bring Down President Trump.